This is the Whole Hog Baseball Podcast, presented by Massage Envy, the first podcast devoted entirely to Arkansas baseball. Featuring insight from Arkansas baseball color analyst Bubba Carpenter. Here's Matt Jones.
It's week 3 of the SEC season. The Razorbacks are ranked number 2 in college baseball. They're coming off a 2-1 weekend at Missouri, and this weekend Arkansas will play the first of 4 really big anticipated home conference series when Mississippi State comes to Baum-Walker Stadium. First game will be played Friday night at 6 o'clock in Fayetteville. Matt Jones with Bubba Carpenter, the radio color analyst for the Razorbacks. You know, I think people look at Missouri and they see that they were the worst team in the SEC last year. They went 8-22 in league play, and they say, well, you know, you beat them and you only beat them by a couple of runs 2 times. And, you know, I just go back to when you watch even some of Arkansas's best teams, and even as recently as last year, every weekend takes on its own identity. And sometimes you get into these dogfights with teams that might not be as good as you, but the objective stays the same. It's just to win the game and get out of there with a series win. And I think there's something to be said for the fact that Arkansas was able to do that on a weekend when the weather wasn't good. Obviously, they're playing in a stadium that's not really at an SEC quality, or at least at the quality of the other stadiums in the SEC. I really think there's something to be said for the fact they got out of there with 2 wins.
Matt, I agree completely. You know, taking 2 out of 3 from them, just winning the series. And you're right. A lot of people don't understand that just winning the series is huge. Now, everyone wants to sweep, but look, it's hard to get a sweep in the SEC. And, you know, if you think back, I mean, that's 12 SEC series in a row that we've won. And that's incredible. I mean, to win 12 SEC series in a row, I don't know that that's been done before, obviously going back into last year, but you know, Missouri's a tough place to play. And I talked to a couple guys about the wind, and they said that was just as cold and as miserable a wind as they've ever played in. And for us to come away with 2 wins is a good thing. And, there were a lot of things that, we could have easily, Missouri didn't play very well. They gave us some runs. I think of the bases loaded pop up to right by Caden Wallace at the right fielder, let drop in front of him. We scored 3 runs on there. There were a lot of things that happened that could have changed that game, but good teams find a way to win, and we continue to find a way to win, and we take advantage of their mistakes. I mean, Missouri didn't play. They were sloppy on defense, but I tell you what they did that I was really impressed with. Their 2-strike hitting was really impressive. I thought they had a really good plan against our pitching staff. But hey, we came away with a series win, and at the end of the day, that's what matters.
Dave Van Horn said after the game on Sunday, he said, it's kind of like golfing. If it's windy, it's okay. If it's cold, it's okay. He said, but in baseball and in golf, when you combine the wind and the cold, it just makes for kind of a miserable playing experience. I'm sure you've been in some games like that. What is it like playing in a game when you've got the wind and the cold mixing the way it did in Columbia? I mean, I'm looking at the weather. I think it was maybe the high was 49 for all 3 days, but then the wind chill, you're talking about they're playing in wind chills that were probably in the 30s at some point.
Well, I'll tell you, as a hitter, Matt, if the wind's blowing out and it's cold and windy, it's a little more tolerable if you're a hitter. But at Mizzou, it was blowing in, and it just sucked. And I played a season and a half in Colorado Springs, and I don't know if you've been to Colorado Springs, but early in the year it can be cold there and windy. We actually had a wind out in Colorado Springs, a beautiful sunny day, but the wind was blowing so hard they canceled the game. I mean, it was crazy. And so it's tough. Dave Van Horn's right. I mean, you can handle the cold or the wind. Like yesterday at Baum-Walker, the wind's gusting at 20-something miles an hour, but it was warm, and so it wasn't bad. But, boy, you put the 2 together, and it makes for a miserable day of baseball.
When you look at the polls right now, Bubba, Arkansas is number 2 in most of the polls. They're number 2 in the coaches poll, which is the one that we use as our poll of record. The polls are all about who's winning games, and it's not necessarily about who's playing its best, who's playing at the best level. It's about who's winning their games. And I think there's something to be said for the fact that Arkansas is playing well enough to be ranked the number 2 in the country, and for its coaching staff to think that they haven't even come close to hitting their stride yet.
I think it's impressive. You look at how we've played, and the starting pitching has been the one constant for us. The starting pitching has been great. I feel like offensively we're still not clicking offensively. Now we've got some guys that have had some good games and shown signs of it. But I think the offense is starting to come together. You really see signs of them coming together, having some really good at bats. Starting pitching, like I said, has been awesome. But the bullpen, there's still things we got to fix in that bullpen. We don't know who to go to in certain situations. We've got our guys that we know. Obviously we got Zeb, we got Evan Taylor, and you got Brady Tigert. That's kind of our go-to guys right now. And then we're still looking for other guys. We need guys to step up. We need Cole Ramage to still step up and do it. But you're right, Matt, in the sense that it's amazing that we're ranked number 2, and you look at it, and we're so much better than what we've played, but we find ways to win. And there's so many little things that we do that equal a win that I still say other teams don't do, those little bitty things. And the stuff that Dave Van Horn and the staff focus on is helping us get some of those wins in games that possibly we shouldn't have won.
We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, how Arkansas's schedule plays out, I think, kind of nicely early in the SEC season, where they don't have to play one of these SEC heavyweights early in the year. Now, Mississippi State, it's obviously a blue blood type program, but they're struggling, and we'll talk more about that here in a little bit. But, it's kind of a stepping stone type schedule. You get to play Kentucky, then you get to play Missouri, probably the 2 worst teams in the SEC East. Then you get to play Mississippi State, and then we'll see how that series goes this weekend. But as far as on paper, it looks like, their first really tough series that they're going to play will be the following week down in Gainesville when they go to play Florida. And I say all that to say this: I think Missouri has got the potential to be a good team this year. Now, they may finish, bottom in the SEC East, but the worst teams in the SEC are still probably among the top 65, 70 teams in college baseball. And I just look at Missouri. They've got a lot of really good hitters. I think they came out of the Arkansas series with 4 guys who were hitting 350 or better among everyday position players. I was talking to some people in baseball last week, and they said that what Todd Butler did in his 1 year in Columbia really helped this program, that, he went out and did what Todd Butler does, which was get, some really good transfers, help them in recruiting some players who might have been overlooked by other programs, and really has helped build up this roster. Now, their pitching, I think, is average. Their fielding is really bad, and we'll talk about that, how the fielding helped Arkansas in this series. But, when I look at the Missouri roster and I see a player like Nander DeSatis, who's their second baseman, this is the guy who hit the RBI to beat Arkansas in Omaha for Florida State in 2019. They have really upgraded their roster, and I think people probably overlook the fact that Missouri is a better team than maybe people give them credit for.
I think so. I watched their approach at the plate, and they really have a good approach at the plate. They find a way to put the ball in play. A lot of really good 2-strike hitting that I referred to earlier, and they seem like they should be so much better. And like you said, they may finish last in the East. Who knows? But they've got a lot of talent on that team. Now, defensively, they got some things they got to clean up. I mean, there's no doubt there. But the pitching staff, they got some guys that can throw it. They got good stuff. But I was really impressed with their offensive approach, the way they made our pitchers really work for their outs. There weren't a lot of really easy 1, 2, 3 innings, and that's a tribute to their hitters. And they played a lot of small ball. They're not a power team. They hit a lot of line drives, but most importantly, they found a way to put the ball in play with 2 strikes, and that's what good hitters do. And so they were, to be honest with you, Matt, they were a lot better than what I anticipated going into the series.
I don't know if people have been to Columbia before. It's a weird stadium. Number one, I think Columbia is not an SEC town. I could go on a long rant about this, but it's like you make that 4.5 hour drive from Fayetteville to Columbia. It might be the closest campus in the SEC. It does not feel like an SEC campus. It feels like a different world when you go up to Missouri. But their baseball stadium's kind of up there on top of that hill. And I was talking to Dave Van Horn about this after the series the other day. He's taken teams to Columbia with Nebraska and Arkansas for conference series. So that, he's been going there for 25 years, is very well aware of that ballpark. And I asked him, is this kind of a sneaky home field advantage? And he agreed with me, that it kind of is. They've got that turf infield, and I think that made a huge difference during the series, especially with some of those wild pitches where the balls took funny hops. but they've got a turf infield, you've got the wind, and it's just a different experience for these players at Arkansas. They play most of their home games in front of anywhere from 6 to 11,000 people. They play road games in the SEC at LSU and Ole Miss and Mississippi State, where the ballparks are full, and some other places. And then you go to Missouri, and you're lucky if you get 800 people in the ballpark. It's just a completely different experience when you play a game there.
I think so. But I think it does give them a home field advantage, because you go in there and it just doesn't feel like SEC baseball. Now, I wasn't there this weekend. I talked to Phil Elson about it, and the all-turf field, to me, it's just not baseball. Their pitchers get used to pitching off the turf mound. And okay, so during the summer, I go out and I coach on our showcase circuit, and we play at a lot of fields that are all turf. And my pitchers hate it. They hate pitching off the all-turf mound. There's no dirt. You can't rub up a baseball. I know they complained about the baseballs being slick in Columbia.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's really nothing you can do about it, because you've got rosin, but rosin's no good if you don't have dirt. So with the slick baseball, I don't know, it's just a different feel, and I really think it does give them a home field advantage, just because it's just the atmosphere alone is so much different. Not what these guys are used to. They're used to Baum Walker. It just feels like baseball when you walk in that stadium. I think the winds can play a huge factor. Of course, their outfielders act like they misplayed a few balls in the wind, so maybe they're not used to it up there either. But it just feels different, Matt, when we go up there. And I think it does give them an advantage. And you look at the past balls, Cole Ramage, 3 wild pitches in a row. Michael Turner blocked those balls. At Baum Walker, none of those get by Michael Turner. But boy, it kicks different off that turf, and it's just a different feel. And like I said, I feel fortunate we were able to get out of there with 2 wins and win the series.
I wanted to ask you about rubbing up the baseballs, because that was something that, like you said, Van Horn mentioned after Friday's game, and he kind of indicated after Saturday's game that it might have been an issue too. And he said that toward the end of Friday's game, when they would send pitchers out to the bullpen, they just started taking balls straight out of the package and had them throwing like that, because they said that they thought that would be a more comfortable feel for the pitchers once they got into the game than balls that have been treated. I think in the major leagues, am I right about this, Bubba, that the umpires are the ones who are responsible for rubbing up those baseballs before the game? Do you know how that works in college baseball? And is it a matter of the fact that there was no dirt to be found in Columbia that might have been why we didn't see the balls get rubbed up quite like they were supposed to be?
I don't know, but I do know that I talked to Matt Hobbs yesterday, and I know they complained a couple of times to the home plate umpire. And he's like, "Hey, there's nothing I can do. Sorry." And when I play on an all turf field, I carry dirt with me, and I rub the balls up myself. Now, I guess you can't do that in an SEC game. If we're playing on an all turf field, I'll take a little bit of dirt and put out behind the mound. And that way my guys know there's dirt right there, or we'll put dirt in our back pocket. We'll find a way to get a little bit of dirt out there just so we can rub it up. But I don't know if that's considered a foreign substance in SEC play, if you're not allowed to do that. I don't know, but there's got to be an answer to it, because these guys shouldn't have. I mean, this is SEC baseball. They should be throwing a baseball that's slick like that. First of all, as a hitter, I don't want some guy throwing 98 and he doesn't have a grip on the ball. You want to be able to control the ball, and it's about having a feel. And I think it was a genius move for them to pull the ball right out of the wrapper, go down there and throw with it in the bullpen. But you could tell it affected some of the guys. I know Connor Nolan had a hard time with his breaking ball early on, just couldn't get a feel for it. I noticed Hagen Smith, constantly licking his fingers, just trying to help find a way to get a grip on the ball. And so it was definitely a factor in the game. And it's, come on, it's 2022. We're in the SEC. We shouldn't be dealing with stuff like that. There's a lot of other things that can come up, but that shouldn't be one of them.
I mentioned this in the open. I think every series takes on a unique identity, and one week's games can't be a predictor for the next week's success. And I thought about last year's Arkansas team. That was the best team in the SEC all season, and that might have been the best team Arkansas has ever had. I know they didn't make it to Omaha, but you put that lineup against the lineup of all these other great Razorback teams that have been to the World Series, and I think they would have played them really well. But you look back at Arkansas's regular season last year, and they went 2-1 against the three worst teams in the SEC West. They actually went 2-1 against the four worst teams because LSU would be in that conversation as well. But A&M, Auburn, and Alabama were clearly worse than the other teams in the division last year. And all three of those games, or all three of those series, Arkansas played at Baum-Walker Stadium. They played A&M there in April. They played Alabama there, obviously, the first week of the season. They played Auburn there the first weekend of April, the weekend that we're getting ready to go into right now. And they went 2-1 in those series. They turned around, though, corrected some of the things that they saw in those series. After Alabama, they went to Mississippi State and they swept. After Auburn, they went to Oxford and they beat Ole Miss 2 of 3. And after A&M, they went to South Carolina on a quick turnaround, what was supposed to be a Thursday, Friday, Saturday series, but they ended up playing once on Thursday and twice on Friday because of some thunderstorms that were coming through Columbia, and they won that series. And I think people have got to wrap their mind around the fact that SEC baseball is really good, and this is not like football where if you struggle against a team like, say Vanderbilt in football, that means something completely different than it does in baseball if you're struggling against a team like Alabama or Missouri. These are teams, like I said, that I think are still among some of the best teams in the country that, if you put Alabama or you put Missouri in the NCAA regionals, they might win a game. These are really good baseball teams. It's just they're playing such good competition in the SEC that their records get driven down. And I think people have to understand the difference between the sports.
Absolutely. Baseball is so much different, Matt, because anybody can beat anyone on any given day. Look at some of these midweek games that happen. Look at Liberty early in the year going down to Florida and taking 2 or 3. Mm-hmm. Anything can happen in baseball. And I agree. You could take the bottom teams SEC and put them in regionals, and they may go through that regional and win it. I mean, that's how good the bottom teams are in SEC. And there's just anything can happen when you go into a weekend. You run into a team that's hot on a weekend. And I think that goes back to the point that I made earlier about how impressive it is that we've won 12 SEC series in a row, and yeah, you want the sweep, but the sweeps are so hard to get. I mean, they really are. And with the talent that's out there right now in college baseball, especially in the SEC, and man, you just keep winning series and good things are going to happen.
Let's talk about Braden Webb and how well he's been playing for the Razorbacks lately. When they beat UALR on Tuesday night, they moved Webb up to second in the batting order, and I think he might stay up there for a little while. Last season, I think they were hitting him leadoff or at the beginning of the season. Then he went through, that slump similar to what he did this year. They're hitting him leadoff a lot during their fall inter-squad games, even in the preseason in January and February leading up to the year this year. But at Missouri, he had the 2-run home run that basically won the game in the 8th inning on Friday night. On Saturday, had it not been for the wind, he would have hit a 2-run home run that would have tied the game in the 8th inning. And then on Sunday, he has what ends up being the biggest hit in the game, a 2-out double down the line that gives Arkansas a 6-2 lead in the 7th inning, and they end up winning 6-4. He is playing really well for them. Even in the UALR game, Bubba, he had the go-ahead. I don't think it counted as an RBI because it was an unearned run, but he had the hit that allowed Arkansas to take the lead in the 6th inning. It is incredible how he has turned his game around in the last 14 or 15 days.
Well, it's good to see. And, you're talking about last season, I'm pretty sure he opened up the season in the 4-hole last year. Okay. In the first game. But, he got – baseball it's so mental. When you get to this level, I mean, you look at the hitting mechanics. Every once in a while, something mechanically will pop up in your swing that you've got to tighten up. But for the most part, it's mental. And, Braden never could get over the hump last year. He got off to a bad start again this year. And I said last night in the broadcast when he walked up to the plate, I said, Phil, it's so good to see the old Braden Webb back. He walks up to the plate with confidence. He's got a little swagger. He just looks different. And about that time, he hits a home run to left field. I mean, you could just see it in the guys. Peyton Stovall early in the year was the same. It's just like the weight of the world on his shoulder until he got that first hit. But baseball's so mental. But, it's a game of failure. And, boy, you just got to be mentally tough. And Braden Webb's worked so hard, so I'm so happy for him to see him start to have success. And it was really good to see him in the 2-hole. I don't think he'll stay in the 2-hole this weekend against State, but it was good to see him up in the lineup last night because he's got all the tools. I tell you what, last night he made an unbelievable play in right field or in the right center on a ball that was hitting the gap. Caught it, glove side turn, threw it a perfect throw into second base, and the guy just slid around the tag, ended up getting a double. But he does so many little things that you don't see on a stat sheet that he brings to the game. And man, I'm just so proud of him, happy for him that he's finally figuring it out. Hopefully he'll stay hot.
Sometimes for those defensive players up the middle, it's just as big of a deal, the number of runs they save as the number of runs they produce offensively.
Yeah, I watch him. He's a lot like Dominic Fletcher was, except he's faster than Dominic. And they move. It's like they have an instinct before the ball's hit. They're kind of already moving that way, or maybe with 2 strikes, they'll take a step or 2 to the right. A guy will hit a ball in the gap and he'll make the play, where if he wouldn't have moved over 2 steps, maybe on a 2-strike swing, he doesn't make that play. Or in an advantage count, maybe he'll slide just a slight step or 2 to the pull side, ends up catching a ball in the gap. He does so many little things that I watch him do that, I don't see other teams. I don't see their center fielders doing them. And it's so good to have him out there in center field. And, he definitely makes our team better, him being out there, because he's got all the tools.
You and I were talking about this. The instincts that Arkansas shows is something that really stands out when you watch them against other teams. And I think back to the Missouri series, there were 2 really pivotal plays where Missouri had gotten a 1-out RBI hit. And I think in both instances, they had 1 out with a runner on third, and they get a runner thrown out. On one time, Josh Day is trying to steal second base. Michael Turner throws him out at second. And on the other, I think it was Nander DeSatis had gotten an RBI hit, and they pick him off. Evan Taylor picked him off at first base. And it's just little things like that can make such a huge difference in the course of a game. And you really see Arkansas winning a lot of those types of, or you see Arkansas winning that element to the game more often than they lose it.
Yeah, and I call it Razorback baseball. And, last night's game, Matt, you weren't there, but in last night's game, there was a situation where bases are loaded. Kendall Diggs is up. He hits a medium hit ground ball to shortstop. Wasn't hit hard, wasn't hit overly slow, but with the bases loaded, shortstop fielded the ball through to second, expecting an easy out at second. But Jalen Battles was at first base. He got a great secondary lead. And busted his butt and got to second base. 9 times out of 10, that guy's out at second. But just the fact that he got a good lead at first baseman was playing deep. He allowed him to get a good lead. He got a great secondary, got a good jump, and ran hard into second. They didn't get the force play at second, so we score a run. And there's they don't get the out. I guarantee, I jokingly say Ole Miss, but an Ole Miss player, they're a little selfish. They don't play the game the right way. They don't get that good jump. They don't get the good secondary with the bases loaded. So therefore they're out at second. But we do so many little things. When I say we, I mean the Razorbacks do so many little things that helps us win games, and it adds up over the course of a season. And I'll attribute that to Dave Van Horn and his style of, the type of player he brings in, that it's about the team. Because in a situation like that, it would have been real easy for him to ground ball to short, not hustle into second base. But I'm telling you, it's plays like that, and it's players and that mentality that helps us win, every win, and ultimately at the end of the season, we're playing postseason baseball.
That play was part of Arkansas's 5-run 5th inning against UALR, and that could have completely changed the game had he not made that play. They needed all those runs, I felt like, to kind of hurt UALR's confidence. They were playing really confidently through the first half of that game. You mentioned Kendall Diggs, and I wanted to talk about him because he played DH on Sunday at Missouri, and in that game he got on base the first 3 plate appearances, had a hit, I think an RBI hit, and he had a couple of walks. He was on base 3 of 4 plate appearances against Mizzou. On Tuesday night against UALR, he was on base in 2 of 5 appearances, hit his first home run, a 3-run home run in the 8th inning. He's playing really well. And you and I watched him together back in January or February, and we're both remarking about, how good he looks for the future of this team. I don't know that we could have foreseen him being maybe a major part of this team, and he still may not be. Brady Slavens is the one that he replaced as DH. Slavens is going to get a lot of opportunities to get out of this funk that he's in. Jace Borfin is going to be back soon, if not by the Mississippi State series this weekend, and that's going to change some things that they do with their lineup. But what Kendall Diggs is doing right now, there's certainly a place for him on this team. I don't know what it is. I don't think it's an everyday DH, but maybe he could end up being this year's Charlie Welch, the guy who comes off the bench and gets you some big at bats and pinch hit type situations.
Well, I haven't seen him have a bad at bat yet. I mean, when he gets an at bat, he takes advantage of that at bat. He works the count. I said something on the air last night, and I want to say Dave referred to it last night in the post game about how he's almost too selective at the plate. There's times where he needs to be a little bit more aggressive, but he doesn't chase pitches out of the zone. He walked last night on a 3-1 pitch, and honestly, all those pitches were really close. And he sees those pitches and he takes them. He doesn't chase pitches out of the zone very often. And I just like the way he puts together pure at bats and really just doesn't give it away at bat. He just goes up there and grinds it out, finds a way to get on base. If you look at his batting average, he doesn't have very many at bats, but right now his batting average is 190, but his on base percentage is 433. So he's finding a way to get on base, and that's what we need. And you watch batting practice. Like yesterday, I watched Brady Slavin's hit, and man, you watch him hit, Matt, during BP, and the ball just makes a different sound off of Brady's bat. And we need him to figure it out and get back in there. But it goes back to that mental side of it. A lot of times Brady goes up to the plate and you just feel like a strike or two. It just kind of, not that he's mentally beat. It's just that I don't know what it is. There's a different look in his swing and his stance compared to in batting practice. If he can get that swing into the games, it's that whole internal versus external training. You get that part into the game, and he's a force to be reckoned with, and he can carry a team, but he just hadn't been getting it done. He's been striking out too much. I don't think Dave thinks he's really having quality at bats at times in big situation. And so Kendall's taking advantage of that. And, it's good to see a freshman get in there and have some good at bats and get a chance to play. And will he stay in there when Bullpen comes back and Brady heats up? Who knows? But he's a good weapon to have off the bench. If that ends up being his role. Charlie Welch, I don't know if he'll be a Charlie Welch, but hey, if he can come in and get a big hit for us late in the game, then that'll be great.
With Slavin's, his body language just does not look great to me. And it's almost like, Bubba, you see a lot of times where, say, he comes up in his first at bat and he swings, maybe through the first 2 pitches. And so he comes up in his second at bat and he's going to take a pitch, and he takes a pitch right down the middle. And that's the best pitch that he's going to see in the at bat. And you can just see it on his face. It's like, why did I not swing at that? It just feels, and this happens to hitters. I know a lot of times the game can really get into your head. And that feels like where he's at right now.
I think so. When you start to struggle, the game speeds up on you. And I feel like at times the game speeds up on Brady, and maybe it's a situation where he takes the first pitch that he thought he should have crushed, or maybe he fouls it back and he'll kind of kick, hit the bat on the ground and kind of show some emotion there and then step back in. Then he'll swing at the next pitch out of the zone, and I think you got to just, for me, it's about winning pitches. You're going to lose pitches. I mean, pitchers are good, especially in the SEC. Pitchers are good. They're going to win pitches. You got to step out, forget about that pitch, and step back in and win the next pitch. And it sounds real easy to do. I'm sitting up there in the booth. It looks easy, but it's not. When you're down there on the field, you're facing 95. You got guys sinking it, cutting it. It's not that easy. But we know Brady can do it. He's got the ability. But you're right on the body language saying you can see it. He really wears his feelings on his sleeves. You can tell. It's just when you watch him, just his body language alone says a lot at times. But I really think he's going to get it figured out. He's too good. He's too good not to figure it out. And I'm sure he's going to be back in there. And once he gets rolling, like I said, he's got the ability where he can carry an offense once he heats up. And I say it all the time, and people get tired of hearing it. Good hitters are defined by what they don't swing at. I go back to Kendall Diggs at bat last night, and he took 3 pitches that a lot of guys would have swung at. They weren't strikes. They were borderline just off the plate, but that allowed him to good pitch to hit. And, later in the game, get a fastball up and away and hit it over the fence for a 3-run homer. I don't know. It's just, sometimes being selective, you want to be aggressive, but selectively aggressive. I guess that's the way to say it.
This goes back to what we talked about in the open. If Arkansas can get Brady Slavens and Jace Borfin hitting at the level that we know both of those players are capable, it completely changes the look of this team, and it changes how good they're going to be once they start playing the better teams on their schedule. Obviously, the numbers have not been there like a lot of people expected they would at this point in the season, but I still feel like the better days for this offense are ahead of it, even though they're going to see better pitching down the road, just because they've got two left-handed hitters like that, who we know they've got so much more potential than we've seen, whether it be for Slavens not producing during the games or Borfin being out for these last few weeks with that injury.
I tell you, I watched Jace Borfin take BP yesterday, and it was impressive. I don't know if he's 100% healthy, but I'm telling you, Matt, he hit the ball like he was healthy last night in BP. I mean, he was hammering balls. Now I get it. That's it's a little different at 5:00 than it is at 7:00. But boy, he looked really good. And you're right. You get those two guys in the lineup. If you're a right-handed pitcher, that's a lineup I wouldn't want to face. You get those two guys hot, and with everything else that we've got in that lineup, it could be a really dangerous mix, and it's going to come together. You know, you talk to Nate Thompson, and you know how hard they work on scouting reports. They work in the cages. They do, you know, there's so much preparation that goes into every game. You know, he's going to get these guys going. At some point, it's all going to click, and when it does, it's going to be a fun offense to watch. And we've seen signs of it, but we still haven't seen the whole lineup clicking yet. And when we do, boy, it'll be fun.
We'll focus more on Arkansas's pitching here in a couple of minutes, but first I want to tell you that the Whole Hog Baseball Podcast is sponsored by Massage Envy, voted the best day spa and best massage in all of Northwest Arkansas. Visit Mike and his staff in Tuscany Square at 2603 West Pleasant Grove Road in Rogers, or in Fayetteville at 3557 North Shiloh Drive. Massage Envy has services for everyone. MassageEnvy.com.
Massage Envy, with clinics in Rogers and Fayetteville, has been awarded Northwest Arkansas's Best Day Spa and Best Massage. One of the reasons is our care for athletes, both serious and recreational. We now offer rapid tension relief sessions using a high-caliber vibrating tool and total body stretch sessions like the ones used by the PGA. Both of these new services can be combined with the always popular deep muscle treatment. So whether you compete or just want to relax, there is no place better than Massage Envy.
WholeHogSports.com has the largest, most experienced staff of reporters covering sports in Arkansas. Football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. You'll find it at WholeHogSports.com. The website includes up-to-minute news, daily commentaries, and award-winning photography from the staffs of Hogs Illustrated and the Democrat Gazette. For subscriptions, call 1-800-757-6277. That's 1-800-757-6277. Or visit us online today. WholeHogSports.com.
You know, it never goes out of style, a great burger. And for a long time now, the best burgers around have been made at CJ's Butcher Boy. I've been stopping at their Russellville location for years to enjoy a double with bacon, cheese, and all the fixins. Well, the fries are always made fresh, and their shakes are made with real premium ice cream. And now that CJ's Butcher Boy has a Fayetteville location too on Weddington, you can bet I'll be there a lot more. CJ's Butcher Boy in Russellville and Fayetteville. When all you do are burgers, they have to be the best.
Welcome back to the Whole Hog Baseball Podcast. Now let's look at this week in the SEC, presented by CJ's Butcher Boy Burgers.
Through 2 weeks in SEC play, Arkansas and Tennessee are the only two teams who don't have a series loss, and I think that goes to show how competitive this league is. The SEC report is brought to you by CJ's Butcher Boy Burgers, and of course in week 2, Bubba, the story going into the weekend and the story going out of the weekend was the Tennessee Ole Miss series. It was expected to be this great slugfest between a couple of great hitting teams, and it turned into, just kind of a one-sided bludgeoning by Tennessee. They beat Ole Miss 26-7 over 3 games in Oxford, and now Tennessee's the new number 1 team in college baseball. That performance was coupled with some losses from high-ranked teams last week, including Vanderbilt, who was number 1 in last week's coaches poll. When you look at what happened between Tennessee and Ole Miss, everybody talks about Tennessee's hitting. There has been some question marks about Ole Miss's pitching this year. They lost Doug Nikhazy and Gunnar Hoagland and some others off of that staff last year. Do you think that says more about Tennessee's hitting? Does it say more about Ole Miss's pitching?
I think it's a combination because Tennessee can swing it. I mean, they really can. They can beat you with small ball. They can beat you with big, with power. They've got guys up and down the lineup. Once again, I go back to their 2-strike hitting, how when they get 2 strikes, it doesn't matter. They'll drive the ball out of the yard, opposite field. If they're in advantage count, they'll pull it out to the pull side. I mean, I think they just have weapons up and down the lineup. And so I know that the Ole Miss staff isn't where, there's a lot of question marks there, especially with their starters. But I think you got to give a tip of the hat to the Tennessee offense, because they went in there and they dominated this weekend.
One of the other series, Bubba, that I thought was really interesting to see the results of in week 2 was Kentucky winning 2 of 3 against Georgia. The Wildcats lost 4-2 on Friday night, but then games 2 and 3 were blowouts. This is a Kentucky team that we said a lot going into the series in Fayetteville a couple of weeks ago, and then coming out of it, that we thought they were a really capable offensive team, and they showed it in that Georgia series. Georgia's a team that can kind of pitch.
Well, that says a lot about our staff, the way we shut down that Kentucky offense. We knew they were good, but we didn't know how good, and they really showed it this weekend. But once again, our pitching staff, that says a lot about how our starters were able to shut those guys down. And Estep, their 2-hole hitter, I used to say that the guy's really good, and we just carved him up all week, and we didn't give him a thing to hit all weekend. And so they're going to be good. And when they left town, we knew they were a good team, but they really showed it over the weekend.
I've heard a lot of people talk about Arkansas being an inconsistent team, but there's a difference in being inconsistent and still winning your games the way the Razorbacks have. And then there's what's happening with South Carolina. Think about South Carolina. They lost a series to Clemson. They turn around, they beat Texas when Texas is number 1. Then they lose, they get swept by Tennessee. And then this last weekend, they beat Vanderbilt 2 of 3 in Columbia. And then they turn around and they lose on Tuesday night to a Presbyterian team that had lost its last game 36-4 to Campbell when they gave up 13 home runs. I just cannot figure out what's going on with South Carolina right now. But them winning 2 of 3 over Vanderbilt certainly disrupted the polls. It dropped Vanderbilt down from number 1 to number 5.
Welcome to college baseball in 2022, Matt. It's crazy, man. Anyone can beat anyone on any given day, and it's just crazy right now. There's so many veteran guys out there that wouldn't normally be playing college baseball still at this time. But South Carolina is a perfect example. From one week to the next, what can happen? From the highs to the lows in the SEC. I mean, it's just it's how it is week in and week out, and I once again, I've already said it a couple of times, but that goes back to how impressive it is what the Razorbacks have been able to do, over the course of the last year and a half. And so it really says a lot about us.
A few other outcomes from week 2. Auburn won 2 of 3 against Texas A&M. Mississippi State won 2 of 3 over Alabama. The Bulldogs had 2 walk-off wins against the Crimson Tide, games that they had to come back and win. And then LSU won 2 of 3 over Florida. Notable midweek score, Texas A&M went to Austin and beat Texas 12-8 on Tuesday night. There was a late inning grand slam that helped the Aggies win that game. This week's series, Florida is at Georgia, Ole Miss is at Kentucky, Tennessee is at Vanderbilt. That's a big one to watch. Tennessee going to put that number 1 ranking on the line against a Vanderbilt team that I think probably has something to prove. South Carolina goes to Missouri, Texas A&M is at Alabama, Auburn is at LSU, and of course Mississippi State will be here in Fayetteville. SEC teams in the coaches poll this week: Tennessee's number 1, Arkansas is number 2, Vanderbilt is number 5, Ole Miss fell from 2 to 10 after that series loss to the Volunteers. LSU's back up to number 12 after beating Florida. The Gators are number 13, and Georgia, kind of surprisingly, only fell 1 spot to number 17 after that series loss to Kentucky. The SEC Report's brought to you by CJ's Butcher Boy Burgers, the best burger in 2 towns. Visit the original at 2803 North Arkansas Avenue in Russellville, or the newest location at 3484 West Weddington Drive in Fayetteville, just minutes from the ballpark. Skip the line and order online or download the app in your app store. CJ's Butcher Boy Burgers. When all you do are burgers, they have to be the best. But I wanted to continue our talk about the Missouri series and kind of focus in on Arkansas's pitching. I was really, really, really impressed, as I think a lot of people were, with the performance of Brady Tigert. He gets 2 saves, pitches 3 2/3 innings, gets a save on Friday, gets a save on Sunday. I think it tells you a lot about his mentality, the fact that he can go out and pitch in tight games. It tells you a little bit about his stuff, that it's good on Friday and it's good 2 days later. You don't always see that with a closer.
That's right. And, you can look at the analytics all day and there's a lot of guys that just their analytics just pop off the chart. I mean, they're ridiculous, but it's another thing to be able to take those analytics, all the skills that you've got, the spin rate and all that, and go out there and get out, especially at the end of a game in SEC Friday night. And, Brady Tiger looks like he's a guy that wants the ball, Matt. There doesn't seem to be any fear when you talk to the coaching staff and the players about him. They're like, yeah, he wants the ball in that situation. And boy, that's really good to see because analytically his numbers are really impressive. I mean, his curveball, the spin rate on that breaking ball, I've got him at 3,100. It's supposedly, he's hit 3,300. That's off the chart. I mean, if you're spinning the ball at 31 to 3,300 RPMs, you're fooling a lot of hitters. That ball doesn't get hit if it's in the zone very often. And so, but to be able to go out there and do it on a Friday and then come back and do it again on a Sunday is really impressive for a guy that generates that much arm speed. And I love his mound presence and nothing seems to phase him. All the other guys were struggling with the baseball, they couldn't get the grip and all that. He found a way to get it done, and that's what you want out of your closer. And it's impressive to see him do that as a freshman. And I think at some point I could see him as a Friday night starter for us.
It seemed to me like he was working more off his breaking pitch in the Sunday outing than he did in the Friday outing. And then, something that you and I talked about earlier this year in relation to Connor Nolan, to Kevin Kopps and the cutter is the concept of tunneling your pitches. And I don't know if you looked at the Pitching Ninjas Twitter account this weekend, but he did the overlay where he had his fastball and his breaking ball. And it was, I'm not going to say it was Kevin Kopps level, but it had a lot of that same feel where, it's about halfway between the pitcher's mound and the plate before that breaking pitch begins to break inside, especially to those left-handed hitters. And that's got to be really hard to read coming out of his hands.
It is, and especially when it's spinning like that, because you don't, there's a huge misconception. You see the spin of the ball. When it's coming 95, 96, you don't see the spin of the ball. You see the shape of the ball. The way it's released, it gives a different shape. But when it's spinning like that, I mean, you don't see the difference. All of a sudden, one pitch looks like it looks the same. It ends up and in right under your hands at 96. The next one starts in the same spot, ends up down and away, and it makes it really tough as a hitter. And he hides his ball so well, the way he spins it. It's really tough, but I did see that overlay, and that was ridiculous. Just the difference in those two pitches where they both ended up, and you tunnel that pitch right there at the top of the zone. It looks like a strike coming out of his hand, and neither one of them ended up being strikes.
Let's talk about the starters for a minute, and I want to start with the final starter of the weekend. Jackson Wiggins throws 7 1/3 innings, 109 pitches. Those are both career highs for him. He tied a career high with 8 strikeouts. It doesn't go down as a, quote, quality start because he gave up those 2 runs in the 8th inning. To me, if you got a pitcher that goes into the 8th inning pitching the way he did, that was a quality start. It was an outstanding start by Jackson Wiggins, and it's 3 straight now where each week he has looked better than the week before, and twice in SEC play. They're starting to get something in Jackson Wiggins. Can he keep this up? I don't know. But, man, he is really, really pitching well for this team.
Well, I talked to Michael Turner about it on Monday, and he said that that's the best Jackson's looked all year. He said he was just incredible. The fastball was jumping out of his hand, had his off speed on point. So, I mean, the stuff is definitely there. What's awesome now, Matt, is he's figuring out how to use it. He can start you with a breaking ball. The slider is actually starting to morph more into a slurve. He's got the slider in the curveball. It's kind of morphing into a slurve now. It's kind of a mixture of the two. He's getting a little bit more depth on it, but he's got confidence now to throw that pitch, where before he was more of just a fastball change guy. His fastball's been riding, 96 to 98 miles an hour. I think he hit 98 like 8 times against Mizzou. And so it's just a nice, easy 98 also. He looks like he could throw 110 if he really tried. But really good to see him go out and have that start. And, once again, it's he goes out every week and just gets it done. And it's good to have him in that Sunday spot.
I was really interested to see how Hagen Smith would pitch at Missouri. He ends up going 5 innings and left in line for the win. The bullpen gave it up in the late innings of that game. It was just the second time, though, that he's pitched away from Fayetteville, and the first time was easily the worst performance that he's had all year. whenever he faced Stanford down in Round Rock. They said he was a little too amped up for that game. And I think the coaches were interested to see, how he can pitch outside of his comfort zone in Fayetteville. And it wasn't his best outing, but it certainly wasn't a bad one.
No, it wasn't. And the thing that impressed me about it is he got in a couple of jams. He found a way to work through it and get out of it. And we already talked about the turf mound, the slick balls. There were a lot of things going on that could have made it a train wreck this weekend, but I don't think a lot phases Hagen Smith. I think he's pretty grounded. He doesn't pitch like a freshman. He doesn't look like a freshman out there on the mound, but he's able to get through 5 innings, 6 hits, 3 runs, 3 walks, 5 Ks. And like I said, more importantly, there were a couple of times to where, if you look going into last year and in the years past, Dave would have gone out there and gone to the bullpen, but they trust him to work through some of these situations, and he finds a way to get out of them.
I wanted to ask you what you think about the bullpen, because, I hear a lot of people complaining about the bullpen because they've had some of these bad innings. They had the 7-run inning against Southeastern Louisiana. They had a 6-run inning against UIC. And then there was that 4-run inning against Missouri. I mean, they literally gave Missouri a run. Cole Ramage walks a batter in 4 pitches and then throws 3 straight wild pitches. That's got to be the easiest run anybody's ever scored in an SEC game. But, when you look at the numbers, though, overall, it seems like the bullpen pitches well. They're 3rd in the SEC in ERA. They're 3rd in the SEC in opposing batting average. I feel like sometimes there's going to be these types of innings. And then I wonder, too, how you think that those types of performances impact the roles from relief pitchers moving forward.
Well, I think we got spoiled with Kevin Kopps last year, and we forget that this is SEC baseball. As you get towards the end of a game, outs get harder and harder to get. And, overall, we've got our 3 guys that we know that Dave trusts. He's got his 3 go-to guys. You got Evan Taylor, Zeb's been throwing great, and then you got Brady Taggart at the end. Aside from that, Cole Ramage, he threw 3 wild pitches, and they were, I think there were a lot of factors that weigh in there. I think at Baum Walker, that doesn't happen. Of course, both teams have to pitch off that mound. Both teams have to pitch with that same slick baseball. Elijah Tress, I can't figure him out, Matt. I watch Elijah pitch. This is the first time I saw him. I'm like, this kid is going to be a stud. He's got everything. He's got all the pieces. It's just a matter of putting it together. Zach Morris is impressive at times. Gabe Starks, still really like Gabe Starks. I think he's got all the tools, and it's a matter of putting it together. He'll walk a couple, and then he'll strike out the side. And so I think there's a lot of talent down there. I think it's still trying to settle into the roles. And I think that's why these midweek games are so important, to get these guys out there and get them some innings so Dave can have confidence in more. You see him leaving, like he left Jackson Wiggins out there on Sunday. I think that says a little bit about the bullpen. He wasn't sure who to go to, and that's why he left Jackson out there. Where in years past, he'd have gone out there and got him. The same with Hagen Smith on Saturday. I think it's just figuring out, who's going to settle into what role. And losing the midweek game last week, I think really hurt us, because there's guys that have gone 2 weeks and not pitched. You look at Mark Adamiak. If you compare him to the other guys on the staff analytically, he's got some of the best stuff on the team. But, he goes out last night and struggles in the first inning, can't get out of the first inning. And I think it's been 2 weeks since he had been on the mound, and you can throw all the bullpens, do all the side work, all that. But when you get out there on the mound, it's different. And these guys need time out on the mound to figure stuff out. And they're really not getting it right now, because there's so much talent down there in that bullpen. It's just a matter of them putting it all together. And I think, kind of like we talked about on the hitting side of it, I think it's all going to come together, and these guys are going to settle into that role. I know that's a really long-winded answer to your question, but I'm optimistic. I think the arms are down there. I think the outs are down there. It's just a matter of everybody kind of settling into that role and figuring out who's going to do what.
I think we're probably about 3-4 weeks away from seeing the bullpen really shorten up. I mean, you think back to some of Van Horn's past teams, like the 2019 team. It was a lot of Scroggins and Kostichak and Cronin at the end of the game. Last year, kind of the same things. Last year, obviously a different animal because of the performances that Kopps was giving them. But it seems like every year it kind of shortens up to where there's about maybe 4 or 5 pitchers that really earn their trust. And somewhere around late April is when you see guys start kind of running out of opportunities.
I think so. I think, last year it was Costu, Monk, and Cops. And that was kind of that's kind of how the story went pretty much every weekend. But it feels like we have more talent down there this year than we've had in the past. I mean, there's so much talent. It's just a matter of putting it all together. And I still say they just need some more time out on the mound. Now, when you get it, it's hard because, once you roll into conference, it's tough to get those innings. We really need these midweek games to get those guys out there. And Nick Griffin's another guy. I know every time you talk to Dave Van Horn or Matt Hobbs, they really like Nick Griffin, and he's got dominant stuff. They just needs to get out there and get some experience, get some work in. I think it'll help having Isaac Bracken back. Hopefully he'll be healthy this weekend. He's a veteran guy that can really come out of the pen and get some out. So there's a ton of talent down there. And I'm not down on Cole Ramage either. I think Cole's breaking balls. Guys can't hit it. It's just a matter of him coming in, being consistent and throwing it over the plate. The walks, those late inning walks will kill you.
We had Matt Hobbs on our podcast last week. He also mentioned Evan Gray as a player who he thinks could be kind of like this year's Heston Toll, the one who's not pitching a whole lot in the season, but there might be a role for him at the end of the season. I wanted to ask you about Michael Turner's catching stance, because if you watch the games on the SEC Network this last week, and in particular the one on Saturday, Chris Burke was really pretty critical of the catching stance and kind of how he stays down on his leg more than in a crouch. I wonder what you think about that, and what do you teach your catchers? And it's hard to criticize, I think, a catcher who's been doing this now for 5 years at the Division I level. To me, it seemed though like, when we talked about this earlier, those wild pitches were more on the turf than they were on the catching stance. The best example I can think of this was, I think, the second wild pitch of that inning by Ramage. Turner was expecting it to go backward, and he goes backward and the ball goes the other way, and it just looks incredibly awkward on the television screen. What do you think about that catching stance? And I mean, do you think that there's something to be said about him being on a leg as opposed to being on a crouch?
Well, first of all, Chris Burke, wasn't he an outfielder?
I think he might have been an infielder. I'm not sure.
So I listened to him to talk about it, and I think you blame it on the turf. Now, when I first started seeing the catchers get down, Gary Sanchez, I'm a Yankee fan, Matt. Sorry to tell you that. Gary Sanchez would do it, and he led baseball in pass balls the last several years by getting down on one knee, and so it made me not like it. But now I'm seeing more and more catchers do it that are still getting to those balls and blocking them. And I've watched Michael Turner block a whole lot of pitches this year. Now, I think it hurts you, on a high pitch. I've seen a couple of high fastballs get by our catchers that are getting down like that. That might be the only drawback. But as far as moving and blocking balls, Michael seems to do a really good job. Dylan Leach the same. They seem to do a really good job of still sliding and blocking that ball. Now, the analytics say by being on a knee, you're able to steal more pitches at the bottom of the zone. But, is it worth it if it's preventing you from blocking pitches, saving wild pitches? Is it worth stealing a pitch or two at the bottom of the zone versus blocking more? I don't know. I've started to come around, though, to the catchers being on a knee. You ask what I teach our guys. Michael Turner actually works with several of our catchers, our younger guys, and he's got them doing that now, and they seem to be doing great at it. And so, we'll see what happens. It's kind of like some of the other things in a game of baseball. It changes. Years ago, when someone would get down on a knee like that, they'd be like, "Wait, what? You can't catch like that. You can't block." But wasn't Carlos Pena the first one that did it? I can't remember. Years ago, someone was down on a knee with their leg sticking out, and I can't remember who it was. I'm a lefty, so I didn't pay a lot of attention to catchers back then. But I think the pass balls in Columbia, that's just due to the turf, not knowing how that ball is going to kick off that turf. It kicks off totally different on turf than it does on dirt, especially you got a guy with a high spin rate. When that ball hits that turf, there's no telling where it's going to go.
I thought we saw that some with Arkansas's infielders too. Wallace and Battles, two of the best infielders they have. They both had what were ruled errors on balls that just looked like they took a funny hop on them.
Yeah, I don't like it. And I haven't been on, I take that back. I was on the turf there in Columbia one year for a showcase tournament, and I just don't like it. I don't like the way it plays. I don't like anything about it. So it's good to step back into the stadium at Baum Walker into a real grass field with dirt. To me, it just feels like baseball. And
Oh yeah.
But yeah, as far as the catchers on the knee, I think that's where I think that's where it's going, and you see everyone doing it now. And so, if you're an old school guy that likes the catcher squat, and I think you're in trouble, because it looks like that's where everyone's going. Everyone's starting to get down on that knee.
Let's say it's 1989, Bubba. You're at George Cole Field, and your catcher gets down on a knee. What's Norm saying?
I can't say it on the air, but it wouldn't have happened. I promise you that. We had some real good catchers back then. We had Kurt Pisker, we had Tony Gilmore, we had Jim Kramers, was a stud. We had several good catchers back then, and I guarantee you none of them would have ever been down on a knee. But things have changed. The game's evolving, I guess, and so you either grow and adapt with it, or you get out of the game.
One of the big moments in the Missouri game on Saturday, or I'm sorry, on Sunday, that allowed Arkansas to score some runs late in the game. I think it was in the 7th inning. There was a balk call against Austin Tresser, who had been Missouri's number 2 starter. And I guess he had an injury the week before that kept him out of the rotation against Arkansas. They ended up bringing him in on Sunday and letting him pitch 3 innings at the end of that game. Missouri, you could hear on the broadcast Steve Beazer saying he stepped off the mound. And it was after this weird conference between the umpires where they probably talked for, I don't know, a minute and a half or 2 minutes about whether or not it was a balk. I'd never seen anything like that before. Did you see it? And kind of take us through that play, and why was it called a balk?
Well, there has to be, you can't do an arm fake to a base if there has to be someone on the base, and so both middle infielders were back. No one was on second base, and you're not allowed to do that. If you remember, Connor Nolan did it early in the year.
Right.
That's how we actually gave up, I think, our first run of the season. Is Connor stepped off, looked to first, did an arm fake, and Peyton Stovall was playing deep behind first base, so he wasn't on the bag, and so they called a balk on it. And it's a rule. I think it's a stupid rule, though, Matt, to be honest with you. I don't like the whole step off and arm fake to stop the clock. I mean, you ought to just be able to just step off, because the arm fake is just silly, and you're do it. What gets me is that it's okay to arm fake without the ball in your hand, but you have to have a defender on the base. I mean, it's silly. Do you know what I'm saying there? If you're going to arm fake without the ball in your hand, does it matter if there's a defender there or not? But the arm fake without the ball is okay, but you can't arm fake without the ball if there's not a defender on the base. It just doesn't make sense. But hopefully that's a rule that they're going to go back and relook at and say, hey, look, this is silly. Let's do away with this.
There was a similar instance like that in the UALR game, right?
Yeah, last night they could have called a balk because I can't remember who the second baseman was last night. Hussein, he was playing almost. I mean, he was back on the edge right by the grass. He wasn't anywhere close to second base, and their pitcher turned around and did the fake. And I said something about it on there. I said that that really ought to be a balk, because there's no defender anywhere close to second base. But they didn't call it for whatever reason. They didn't call it, and Dave didn't say anything about it, and so they just let it go. But yeah, you could have technically called a balk on that. And I said last night on the air, I said at some point that's going to happen in a big game later in the year, and it's going to be a huge controversy. I think it's going to happen with somebody. I don't think it'll happen with a Razorback pitcher, because we've already been through it and experienced it with Connor Nolan. So I don't think we'll do it again, but I think someone will.
I wanted to ask you real quick about your thoughts on the UALR game last night. Arkansas ends up winning 16-8. They got behind by a score of 6-0 after 2.5 innings. And I don't know about you, but as I was watching it, I kind of had this thought of, oh no, here we go again. This is like the 2019 UALR game all over. But then, middle innings, Arkansas's bats kick into gear. I thought that, the innings, even though Miller Plyman gave up a couple of runs, I thought he gave him a couple of really strong innings, 2 1/3. And then Evan Taylor, I thought those were really important innings that he pitched, because they were getting some hits off of Plyman. They weren't touching Taylor very much.
Yeah, you're right. And I felt bad for Mark Adamiak. Like I said a minute ago, it had been a couple weeks since he'd been on the mound. That last Wednesday's game getting rained out, I think that really hurt, because I think he'd have got a couple innings. I felt bad for him because he's got such good stuff. He just could not get out of the inning. He couldn't get a feel. I thought he had it for a minute, and threw a couple of really good cutters in there. He's throwing that cutter at 89, 90 miles an hour, and it's dirty, just late good late movement on it, but he just couldn't figure it out. But yeah, Miller Plyman coming in, I like the fact that he's a Fayetteville kid, homegrown. So it's good to see a kid like that grew up around here out there on the mound. Anytime I see a local kid out there, I love it. But in 2 1/3, 4 hits, his slider was going. He had him fooled on that slider. His slider is a little bit different than some of the other guys. He's got more horizontal break, and I think the UALR hitters were struggling to pick that up. I thought Cole did all right too. 2 innings. He gave up a home run, but just 1 pitch. Other than that, I thought Cole looked good. Evan Taylor's always good. Starks was good. Walked the first guy and then struck out 3. And then Zeb came in and was looked good. Also was throwing hard. Gave up a couple of hits and a run. But I thought overall it was good. And when we were down 6-0, I said to Phil, I said, look, we're 6 runs isn't going to win this game. I knew it was just a matter of time. Credit Jacob Weatherly, the starter for Euler. He did a great job, and I think Chris Curry went with him as long as he could. And then once he got him, the bullpen kind of faltered. They struggled throwing strikes, and then we took advantage of that.
And I think that goes back to the mentality that we were talking about in the outset of the show. The fact that Arkansas didn't fold when they got down by 6-0, that they kept battling back and made it look like an easy win in a game that really wasn't that way.
Right. The way it started out, and look, Chris Curry's team, they can hit the ball. They really can. You look at their batting, their team averages 310, 311. They can swing it. Their defense wasn't very good last night. I think they made 3 errors, but they can swing it. So you make a mistake, you leave it over the middle of the plate, and they're going to hit it hard. And they hit several balls hard last night. I keep a chart on it in my book, and they hit several balls hard and had some really good at bats. If fortunately for us, they brought a couple guys in that had trouble finding the strike zone, and we got some runners on base and popped a couple of big hits and were able to blow, ultimately pull away at the end. But yeah, at the beginning of the game, I know there were some people a little bit, thinking like you did, here goes 2019 all over again.
Massage Envy has been voted the best day spa and best massage in all of Northwest Arkansas. Great therapists and estheticians go along with a new service that I am truly excited about. Rapid Tension Relief uses a special tool that will melt the tension and soreness away. Trust me, you will not be disappointed in the results. I highly recommend this feature along with a total body stretch assisted stretch program. Whether you are competing at a high level or just want to relax, these services are for everyone. Massage, rapid tension relief, total body stretch, deep muscle treatment massage, you choose. Or you can try any combination of those. So the next time you're feeling tight, make sure to call my friends at Massage Envy.
Want more coverage of your home team? Download the Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Check out the Fan Zone and get up-to-the-minute videos, podcasts, and features on football, basketball, baseball, recruiting, and more. Search for Whole Hog Sports on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire at home. And take it with you on the go by downloading it for your mobile device in your app store. The Whole Hog Sports Video on Demand app. Get it today.
Grease Pig, this is Mike.
Coming in hot, so I can just stay in my vehicle during my oil change?
That's right. The Grease Pig wants to help keep you safe, so now you can stay in your vehicle during your oil change.
These guys are working like a pit crew.
That's part of our 17-point inspection, where we check your belts and hoses, we check and fill all your fluids, and offer full repair on all vehicles. And of course, we use Castrol products.
Why do I smell coffee?
You know our waiting room is still open.
And give up front row seats to my own oil change? No, thank you. You're doing awesome. Mike, I think I'm making them uncomfortable.
Get into the Grease Pig, your local automotive specialist for over 20 years.
Welcome back to the Whole Hog Baseball Podcast. Let's take a look at the week ahead, presented by Grease Pig.
Arkansas and Mississippi State will play 3 times this weekend at Baum-Walker Stadium. The game times are 6 o'clock Friday, 6:30 Saturday, and 2 o'clock Sunday. Friday's game will be televised by SEC Network. The games on Saturday and Sunday will be on SEC Network Plus. The week ahead is brought to you by the Grease Pig. For 20 years, they have specialized in serving UA students, faculty, and staff with 2 locations in Fayetteville on College Avenue and MLK Boulevard. The Grease Pig has experience for all your repair needs and, of course, complete service oil changes staffed with ASE certified master technicians. They also provide tires and alignment services at their location on College Avenue. The Grease Pig, it's all about taking care of you, and they are a proud supporter of the Whole Hog Baseball Podcast. Mississippi State comes to Fayetteville, the reigning national champion, but in the midst of kind of a weird season, the Bulldogs are just 16-10 overall after a midweek win over Memphis this week. And Mississippi State has lost 3 weekend series already this season. They lost a very high-profile series at the beginning of the year to Long Beach State in Starkville. 2 weeks later, they went to New Orleans and lost the final 2 games of that series against Tulane. And then they opened SEC play with a series loss at Georgia, where they lost games 11-0 and 12-11 before winning the finale 20-3. And Bubba, I think that series probably says as much about Mississippi State as anything. They can play you really close. They can get blown out. They can blow you out. You just never know what you're going to get with this team this year.
No, you don't. I think they're still reeling from losing Landon Sims. That was a huge blow. You know, he was going to be their Friday night guy, going to anchor that staff for them, and I think losing him, and then they lost their best arm out of the bullpen. I think losing those, you know, Sims especially, but you know, you lose a couple of good arms like that, and I think they're still kind of reeling from that. They just haven't put it together yet. You know, you look at their starting pitching though, and it hasn't really been bad. They've got 3 consistent starters that have been giving them, you know, 6 innings. Their Saturday guys had 1 bad start where he went 3 2/3, but other than that, they've been going 5 or 6 innings. So it hadn't been the starting pitching hadn't been terrible. They're just, you know, they're just having a hard time putting it all together, and it's kind of feast or famine when you look at their scores. They were able to win a series at Alabama this past weekend. They won a couple of walk-off wins Friday and Saturday, and then got beat 6-2 on Sunday. But you know, it's once again though, you just don't know, Matt, when you get into SEC play what's going to happen. You really don't know which team's going to show up this weekend. On paper, if you look at the matchup, you know, we look pretty good on paper compared to them. I mean, pretty even offensively, but pitching wise, you know, we definitely have a huge edge. They do strike out a lot of hitters, so their pitching staff, but it's crazy. You just don't know what's going to happen. I like the fact that we're playing at Baum Walker, though. I think it gives us a huge advantage.
You mentioned Landon Sims and the injury to him. You know, Kentucky just lost their number 1 starter, Cole Stupp, in the Georgia series. He's out for the season now. That's now, I think, 4 SEC teams that have lost their number 1 starter this year. Sims at Mississippi State, Stupp at Kentucky, of course, Peyton Pallette at Arkansas, and Connor Prelip hasn't pitched this year for Alabama. You know, Tennessee, they've had an injury to their number 1 starter. LSU's number 1 starter is dealing with some injuries. I think that people underestimate how much that affects the totality of your pitching staff whenever you have to replace those 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 innings that you were going to get from one guy in the course of a weekend. Now you got to go replace those innings with pitchers who may not be pitching on the weekend in the first place.
Right. And it just changes their roles, and baseball players are creatures of habit. They kind of settle into their role. I think that gives it, you know, the Razorbacks, we have an advantage because we got so much depth. You know, we're able to plug different guys in, but boy, just losing that Friday night guy can just be a dagger to some of these teams that really don't have the depth down there in like we do. And you really see it with Mississippi State because, you know, defending national champions, they were ranked high coming in at, you know, high expectations, and then they've just kind of fallen apart this year. And it's unfortunate to see that. And you hate to see guys get hurt, go down, but that's part of the game. And that's why, you know, you got to recruit the way you do. And I think it's unfortunate to see some stuff going on in SEC, but you know, it is what it is, man. It's part of the game. And, you know, we'll see what happens this Friday.
I don't think Arkansas and Mississippi State's players are too fond of one another. You watch their series, and there's a lot of talking going on between those teams. And Arkansas has won. Not only have they won 2 straight series, they have swept Mississippi State the last 2 times they played them. They swept them in Fayetteville in 2019. Of course, they couldn't play in 20. They swept them last year in 21. Do you think revenge is a factor at all this weekend on the Bulldogs' part?
I think it could be, because I think the sweep last year, you know, it kind of hurt them. And I think coming in this year, they got a little chip on their shoulder, especially with the way the season's gone. I think they're going to come in. You're going to see a good Mississippi State team, you know, when they come into Fayetteville this weekend. They always seem to play us tough, and so I think it's going to be a great series. Still, I think I give us the advantage, though. I really do. I give us advantage of starting pitching. I give us advantage at the plate, and I just think it's going to be a good series. So I look forward to it.
I'm looking at the weather. The weather's supposed to be pretty good for this weekend. There is a slight chance of showers on Friday night, but that's probably going to be later in the night. And the reason I say that is because the weather always affects the crowds. And I think this is going to be the first weekend when Arkansas gets a really big, regional, super regional type crowd for 2, if not all 3 games against their opponent on the weekend. And I think that's going to make a big difference this weekend. And I really feel like with some of the Arkansas fans I know, there's a sense of, I don't know if it's envy or jealousy or hatred or what it is toward Mississippi State, but the fact that for all these years, Arkansas and Mississippi State have kind of been, really similar programs, but neither of them could break through and win in Omaha. Now Mississippi State got that national championship, and I think you might see some of that coming out in the crowd this weekend.
You might see it, and I hope you're right. I hope we pack that place in. It's funny, Matt. I call it the pucker factor. And when the fans at Baum Walker really get going and get loud, you can affect that other. It affects their pitching staff. It really just has an effect on the game, and I think our players feed off of it. And we play way better here at Baum Walker, and so hopefully we'll pack that place this weekend.
Connor Nolan did not get to pitch against Mississippi State last year because he was injured. When he pitched against them as a freshman, he pitched really well. In fact, that might have been the best performance that he had all season as a freshman. He had those back-to-back weekends against Tennessee and Mississippi State. You expect him to bounce back this weekend after having, a down outing for himself. But just pitching-wise, what do you expect from Arkansas this weekend against the Bulldogs hitters? How challenging do you think this will be? Do you think this is going to be any more or less challenging than the Kentucky series a couple of weeks ago?
I don't think it's going to be similar to the Kentucky series. Typically, Mississippi State has an aggressive team. They like to swing early. I think that plays right into Connor Nolan's hands. I really do. I think if he's got that 2-seam going Friday night, he can get a lot of quick, 1-2 pitch outs with that 2-seam fastball, mixing in that cutter and slider. So I think that's a good matchup for Connor. The way these guys swing the bat versus the way he throws.
Arkansas is ranked number 2. Mississippi State is not ranked. We all know, though, what Mississippi State's capable of. We know how good that lineup is. If Arkansas can't win this weekend, is it an upset?
Yeah, it's an upset. Anytime we lose, it's an upset, Matt. It's especially here at home at Baum Walker. If it's on the road, yeah, probably not. But here at Baum Walker, yeah, it'd be a definite upset.
Other than that NC State series last year to end the year, Arkansas hasn't lost a series at home since 2019. They haven't lost a series to Mississippi State here in Fayetteville in a really long time. I think it might have been 2013 or 2015, the last time that the Bulldogs came in and won a series here in Fayetteville. They haven't had a whole lot of success in Baum Walker Stadium. Again, Arkansas and Mississippi State this weekend. Game times at 6 Friday, 6:30 Saturday, and 2 o'clock on Sunday. Visit us at wholehogsports.com before, during, and after the games. We'll have all the coverage you need from the Razorback series against the Bulldogs. We'll be back with another podcast next week to recap the Mississippi State series and to look ahead to the Razorback series against the Florida Gators. For Bubba Carpenter, I'm Matt Jones. We appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you next week.
The proceeding has been a production of wholehogsports.com. Look for our latest podcasts on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast store. And visit us anytime at wholehogsports.com for the latest news and commentary.